Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Roots record, And You Shoot Your Cousin, Papa. The Roots, fantastic, Philadelphia-based hip-hop outfit, been at it for years. You may also currently know them as the house band for the Jimmy Fallon Show, but before that, prior to that, they came out with many classics, hip-hop classics, like this record over here, Things Fall Apart. Game Theory's great. Do You Want More? Organics. If you love hip-hop, if you love live instrumentation, if you love jazz rap, if you love hardcore hip-hop, if you love gritty lyricism, then do get into the Roots music. However, with this latest strain of albums that they've been coming out with and side projects and collaborations and experiments, their trajectory has been a little turbulent. A lot of surprises coming down the pipe from the Roots. Don't really know totally what to expect from them these days, and it's made some of their more recent records kind of exciting to look forward to. But I'm not going to be taking on this new Roots album by myself. I'm actually going to be talking about it with Joel of the Daily Guru. This album is about to change. Transition, and here we are through the power of the internet with Joel, aka the Daily Guru. Like I said, we're going to be talking about this new Roots record. Joel, thoughts on the record?
Wow. I will say that first off, I wasn't a huge fan of the last record when it dropped, when Undone came out. And when I heard the single that they released for this one, I was even less excited about it. I didn't have very high hopes. And this is one of the most unique records I've heard in a long time, in that I was first completely disappointed with it, and now less so. After 30 or 40 listenings, I'm not as disappointed, and there are actually parts I really love about it.
But only like sort of less so?
So it's sort of like, I'm not in love with the record, but I don't, it's not nearly as bad, because I think this is almost, to kind of jump to a summary almost, I think this is the sort of record that you're going to need to spend some serious time with before you can actually understand what they're doing with it, because the first 2 or 3 listens, I have a feeling a lot of people will write it off.
Which is weird, because it's so short, and you would expect that such a short record would not dominate so much of your time.
Yeah, and I mean, especially with the Roots, it's almost like, for them, given their usual album length, this is almost like an EP for them, because I think it's only like 31 minutes or something, which was very surprising.
And I mean, a lot of those tracks are interludes. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them,
there's that really awkward one too, the one that sounds like it's almost like a door buzzer.
Yeah. And there are a handful of tracks on here that don't even breach that 3-minute mark.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was a bit strange, because they really don't dig in a lot, and I'm looking at it right now.
I have to say, I didn't care for this record, but still, I think it does have its unique qualities in their discography, and I think this adds up to the fact that, like you said, you may need to give this thing more listens. This is easily their most depressing record. I think it's the saddest record. I think this is their bleakest.
It's dark. It's dark. One of the things I wrote down is, I said, it sounds like this album was created in like a burned out warehouse with like the windows blown out, because it has a very almost concrete feel to it. It's a very desolate record.
It's an album that I think draws from a lot of the same storylines and from a lot of the same emotions and from a lot of the same issues fueling a record like Undone, but here instead we're getting kind of a darker musical component to match this kind of storytelling. You have all these seedy characters, or not really necessarily seedy characters, but characters that are turned seedy by their surroundings over time and not really seeing a way to get out of it, and just sort of going along with the narrative of this place where they're being raised, where they're growing up, just this life that they're used to. And now we're given so much darker and just drearier instrumentals to back that up.
For me, that's a good thing. I mean, looking at it overall, I enjoyed the music a lot more than I did any of the lyrics, which again isn't that strange for the Roots, because they're fantastic musicians. And I also, that was also because I didn't feel there was much lyrical continuity, because there were so many different people showing up on the record, and while it does have an overall loose storyline, I think they were trying to do it too much, and it didn't work in the end.
I don't know. A lot of people have been making a big deal of this record being another concept record, just like Undone. And Undone, to me, is so interesting in that you kind of have this one character who you get to know, in a sense, in a lot of different ways. You hear sadder tracks recited through the eyes of this person. You hear more aggressive tracks recited through the eyes of this person. So you get to know this character in a lot of ways. You get to know his doings, his thoughts, his motivations. And on top of all of that, the storyline that leads to his death is played in reverse on the album itself.
Yeah.
And while this record itself is also being tagged as this concept album, I'm not really hearing it done to the impressive degree that Undone was. I mean, for sure, you know, the Roots deal with a lot of these same themes, but they string it out among a bunch of different characters. And, I mean, is there a concise storyline that is played out from beginning to end? Not that I've picked up. Instead, I'm just kind of getting a bunch of, I don't know, vignettes or just sort of just personal musings or monologues from this variety of people who were all going through this series of tribulations.
Yeah, I definitely saw it as kind of monologues, almost like it. To me, it almost struck sometimes as a pulp novel, a musical pulp novel, and that, you know, you got little brief interludes, or, you know, you got little brief views into these people's worlds. They were all similarly dark and destitute, but there really wasn't that connection between them. And again, I think that's where I kind of fell apart with the album lyrically, because it was clear they were trying to have some cohesive theme, but it just wasn't there.
Maybe it was because they didn't dive into these characters deep enough. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but for whatever reason, these characters to me weren't as interesting as the character that they delivered on Undone. But I think maybe the most glaring issue on this record is with the production. As dreary and as bleak as it is, which does give this album a unique edge, with songs like Tomorrow, like you said, which was a lead single from this LP, had me incredibly just not excited for listening to this album. Not only because I thought the beat itself was really redundant, and I thought the bit of very fake-sounding reverb on Raheem Vaughn's vocals on the track was just like production faux pas rule number one. But I mean, I think lyrically the song was really underwhelming as well. I mean, and the singing as well, which wasn't terrible, but it just felt like, I don't know, it just felt like they weren't trying.
Yeah, you know, I think it's a thing everybody is sort of thinking, people who enjoy the Roots, is since they became the house band on Fallon, they're playing with each other three, 4, 5 nights a week, and there's really no time for that individual creativity to really kind of start again. And I think maybe that's why the records just haven't been as impressive.
I feel like the Roots haven't lost, not at all, their sense of adventure, but you're not really getting the depth and the length. They hit you with a new idea, and then that new idea falls flat because they don't find out a way to actually make it stay appealing for the length of a record, and even draw these ideas out past 40 minutes.
Yeah.
Even Undone. I mean, Undone, while it was longer than this record, it was still one of the Roots' shortest. You know, It wasn't one of their longest records. And on top of all of it, that album was ended with a bunch of these really weird,
awkward instrumentals.
These little instrumentals would have sounded so much better maybe just interspersed in between tracks throughout the record, but instead they were all just bunched together at the finish and didn't really sound like much. They just kind of sounded, again, kind of like this album, a little bit of an epilogue of I don't know, unnecessary ideas, unnecessary only in the regard that, I mean, they're not going to become necessary until they figure out how to draw them out into something more interesting. Not only did Tomorrow underwhelm me, but other tracks on here, sort of like The Coming with Mercedes Martinez, which I think was like the 8th track on the record, a song that, while it wasn't bad, it was sort of an interesting little vocal and experimental piano piece.
Yeah.
It's not something I usually want to hear from the Roots, and it's not something that I want to hear from the Roots at all if they're going to come at me with a record this short.
Yeah, there was really only one track on the album that, as a complete piece, really made me say, okay, you know, that's a cool song. It was the song Black Rock, and I just thought it came together well there. And to me, it would have been kind of a middle card on a great album. You know, It wasn't enough to build an album around, but I think it was the strongest overall, you know, on this record. And Yeah, there's a good key part on it. There's a good groove to it, and I did find myself turning it up and playing it again here and there. But um, overall, yeah, the music to me was good. The lyrics, I mean, one of the things that's always made the Roots great is that they brought fantastic orchestrations, unique orchestrations, doing things that nobody else would do in hip hop. They've kind of done that here, but the other big part was there were always great lyrics, and I just didn't find the lyrics to be what I would call great anywhere on the album.
Well, that hasn't disappointed me. What disappointed me, specifically on a track like Black Rock, which I believe is a song that has Dice Raw singing on the hook.
Yeah.
That hook is awful.
Yeah.
That is an awful hook.
Yeah.
His singing on that hook is terrible, and I have no idea why they let him do it.
Yeah, that's what I think my number one, where you were talking earlier about production, I think that's what comes into it is in a number of different ways. You're just like, they're a band who understands music better than almost anyone else in their genre, and better than most people in popular music today. Why are they making mistakes like that are so glaringly obvious? Are they just lazy, or does it come down to the fact that they're like, oh, we're going to sell a lot of units, let's just do it?
It was with that, and it was with one of the opening tracks on here with Patty Crash.
Uh-huh.
I know a lot of people sort of make this comparison to singers when they don't care for their voice, but she really sounded like a cat to me. Like I was listening to... Like it was just not appealing.
It was overdone. It was too present in the song. It was like all hook.
And that's another thing, and which I think also adds to the disappointment that people have with a lot of the Roots' most recent material when it comes to the rapping and the verses. I mean, it's really the longest song on here, which I think was about 5 minutes long, that really hits you with a series of bars. I think Black Thought comes with the longest verse on the entire track. Dice Raw comes through with like a few bars, and there's a short verse toward the end of the track. There's no hook on the song whatsoever. Yeah. It's just straightforward bars after straightforward bars. And while it wasn't a bad track, it just didn't live up to the expectations that I have for their older stuff, or even their most recent stuff either. I feel like the Roots have made a really interesting and, for the most part, successful transition into an area of their career where they're able to write more deep, thought-provoking, from a conceptual standpoint, songs instead of simply relying on rapping. And that's fine.
Sure.
This, however, I think is their first major failure on that conceptual side of the fence. They've had their records when they were more into that hardcore hip-hop area of their career that weren't as good as others. But even this record, to me, sits below those. But you said this record ended up like growing on you a little bit after you gave it numerous listens. I mean, what ended up making you kind of come around on it a little?
The music, the lyrics really, like I've been saying, the lyrics really never got me. They never really did anything for me. But musically, I was finding bits and parts of the hooks where I said, okay, this isn't terrible. And some of them I was like, okay, I actually like that orchestration.
Yeah, some of the piano samples inside of these tracks are just really pretty and just really dreary. They just really hit a good spot.
That is where I enjoyed the record. Is, like I said, probably 30 or 40 listens in, when I kind of know where it's going. There's some really good grooves hidden in there, some nice bass lines. But overall, it's I guess it's what I expected. After I heard the single, that it was just be like, oh, that's what you're going to advertise this record as?
I think I got the record I should have expected, given that was the first track that they would have handed us.
Yeah, the thing I kept saying to myself as I'm listening to it is, are they just not hungry anymore? And this is what happens when a hip-hop collective kind of, for lack of a better term, reach middle age and kind of have it a little bit cushy, so they're just kind of trying to make the music they know their audience wants. I'm not saying they've compromised their integrity. I'm saying they know the kind of stuff their audience wants, and they're just kind of giving it their best shot now.
I think I'm going to leave it there. Score-wise, I'm really feeling at the most like a decent to strong 4 on this thing, really.
I'm going to give it a 5.5 because there are 1 or 2 piano progressions that I really, really like, And for me to say something is more on the terrible side as opposed to the good side, I wouldn't put this there because I do think musically it has a lot to it, and maybe they can take these back to the drawing room and do some remixes, i.e., make them better. And we'll see. We'll see like part 2 of this.
All right, Joel. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah.
Anthony Fantano, The Roots, and then You Shoot Your Cousin forever.